So the Raffles Crew is a business network in Singapore. We focus on caring for ourselves, caring for our careers, and caring for our planet. And this session is about ourselves and our careers, I guess, because it's about the nexus of career that occurs when we're in our 40s, 50s, 60s. I'm 68, so I've certainly hit this barrier. That is that I can't get a job in any corporate situation. So we're in a curious situation where people are living longer, but they're still finding it difficult to actually get paid employment once they get into their 50s, which is rather curious. So today we are tackling this through the good offices of four wonderful panelists. First of all, Ima Abdul Rahim, who is currently here in Singapore, who is CEO of the Karam Sarai Collective, and who is a wonderful, wonderful, she's a political activist. She's very erudite. She's a storyteller. Ima, welcome.
Hi, everyone. Good to be here.
Um, this is in the order in which they speak, not in any sense in the order of importance, is Dr. Damien Cummings, who has made an amazing pivot from really being a tech superstar in industry to being an academic at the University of Singapore. Damien, welcome to you. Or shall I call you Dr. Damien?
Damien's fine. Well, good to be here. Thank you.
Okay, super. And then the wonderful Dr. Daniela Alina Plura, who's a good friend of ours and a good supporter of the Raffles Crew, who, among other things, she's founder and director of the Odo Group, but also she's been talking to me about carrying a flag for the aging community looking for work for quite a long time, from the point of view of political activism, from the point of view of changing the way that corporates think. So a very warm welcome, Daniela.
Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. And last but by no means least, because he came up with the topic. So I guess Miguel, you're what, 52? Is that what you told me? I guess you're getting worried, right, about what's happening. So so Miguel, very good to see you, and thanks very much for coming up with this topic. You are going to go fourth, so you get the last word. So that's wonderful. So the topic, sorry. Hi, Miguel.
Hi.
Good.
57, Simon.
Wow. Okay. Wow. So nothing wrong with that. How senior leaders are pivoting later in their careers. So often because they have no choice, we have no choice. We have to change. You know, I made the change from paid employment with a large consulting company to starting a series of companies of my own. A change that I thoroughly enjoyed, but it's quite hard to do, and it's fraught with risk. So no doubt that will come up today as part of our discussion. Some interesting data. We already know that the first person to live to 150 has been born. Harvard just came up with some research that said someone in their 20s today will live till they're 150. I don't know whether we have anyone in their 20s on this call, but maybe it's you if we do. Okay, so Raffles Crew. What is the Raffles Crew? We are a business network. We started with five people around a table about a year ago. We're just tipping 300 members now. Our difference, I suppose, is that all our meetups are free. We focus on service and gratitude. That is how we can help other people rather than what we can get for ourselves. And we welcome anyone who's willing to engage wholeheartedly. In addition to our complimentary gatherings, which include pizza nights on Tuesday, Wednesday morning gatherings at Paya Lebar Quarter, Friday morning gatherings at Providor, which are very well attended. We're sort of starting to take over Providor Raffles Place on Fridays. So a great vibe. You're all perfect. You're all welcome. And there's a QR code in this deck if anyone wants to inquire about the Raffles Crew and get information about what our future events are going to be. We welcome what we call seekers, funders, and founders. What does that mean? A seeker, someone who's between things, who's looking for something better, which is kind of what this discussion today is about, yeah? As well as founders, creative founders, startups, individuals that have got disruptive ideas. We have a lot of those in the Raffles Crew, as well as a lot of investors. So our Friday coffee at Raffles Place on the left-hand side, we had I don't know if you know Kotu. Kotu is modestly named the center of the universe. It's a wonderful club, 16,000 square feet, located just next to Raffles Place in Capita Green. We have an event coming up there on the 23rd of June. We expect to see between 80 and 100 of you. And the theme we'll show on the next page. We also have a series of panels. Because we care about the business community, we issue a quarterly regional forecast for Asia. This is in partnership between Raffles Crew and the global CIO office led by Gary Dugan. Gary lives in Dubai, so this is a bit early for him. It's 5 a.m. or something there. So you will find on our YouTube channel, should you deign to go to it, a very short interview with Gary on what the outlook is for this region. And I only throw that in here because let's remind ourselves that we are in the fastest growing region in the world. So despite all the angst around what's coming out of the US and potential impacts on our lives, the reality is that the IMF, based on the most recent forecast, which is the end of last month, think that we're still going to get growth around about 4.5% in this region. And Gary and I talked about that on the 24th of May. And next week, we have a panel with some very storied individuals talking about the impacts of growth and what's happening in this region. So do sign up to that. If you join us, you'll get all the information about that. I mentioned the Seekers, Founders and Funders event at Kotu. This is a ticketed event, unusually for us. We've got 3 wonderful speakers talking to us about different aspects of communication. Mark Laudy talking to us about how to overcome stage fright. The wonderful Grant Bosnick. Grant is with us today. Morning, Grant. Thanks for joining us. Who's talking about the importance of emotional intelligence.
Thank
and
you.
Ema, he's also, hi Grant. And also Ema, who you're going to hear from presently. So that's going to be an absolutely wonderful event. It's going to be a very colorful event because at Raffles Crew, we are positive, we are grateful, we love color, we love joy. So we're not a glum lot. Do click on this at some point. I'll put it on again at the end. Delwyn, maybe you can add this to the chat or link to the chat so that people can join this during the course of the day. Yeah. So there's no obligation, there's no fees. Join the Raffles Crew, find out what's going on. Yeah. Well, shall I now introduce our first speaker, Damien? Ema, sorry, Ema.
Thank you, Simon, for leading us in this charge. Thank you so much for joining. I see a number of names in the call that I recognize, and I'm so happy to see them here, although I don't see their faces, but I know you're here. This topic came to me from Simon and of course Miguel, and I thought, oh my goodness, this is me. This is me actually in life. I've always I got bit by the traveling bug very early in life from my parents moving us around in various places, and we've always had to pivot as a family. And so pivoting in my career, in later on my career, is something that, although I thought, oh, easy peasy, but yeah, no, it came with its challenges. But it wasn't something that I was that I feared. It was something that I looked forward to. I built my career in Indonesia. I was for almost 20 years. I was with the Habibie Center, and working with former President Habibie in a think tank, leading his think tank in Indonesia, and worked on issues around the region. And I used to say, it's like, that was it. That's where I'm going to say, that's where I'm going to do for the rest of my life, because he gave me such carte blanche to run programs, to do amazing things in the space of democracy and human rights. And I thought, that's it. I'm set for life. I can build this organization. And I was there for 19 years building the organization. And then, of course, life has a way of calling differently, and an opportunity came about for me to actually uproot myself from Indonesia and to move to Singapore, where I was given the opportunity to work for the first time in my life in corporate, in a multinational company. So I was director for public policy for Southeast Asia at Facebook, or Meta. And that was one of the biggest pivots I think that I experienced. And I can go on about working at Meta, but that's not what this is about. Because 4 years of my stint there, I realized that values didn't no longer aligned, and I didn't like what I was seeing, and I didn't like the feeling of not knowing what was going to happen next. And so I decided to really take the plunge and didn't know what was going to happen next. So really took the plunge and actually pivoted to something that I didn't realize was going to be something completely different. So a week after I resigned, I kind of just after the shock of, I just resigned from a high paying job. What am I going to do? I took really stock of my I really took stock of what I had done already. Um, when I resigned, I was 48. Yeah, I was 48. I'm 50 now, and that was 2 years ago. And I realized that I really wanted to do something meaningful for the rest of my life, however long it was going to be. And I decided that, really looking at something that I could do that was impactful, that I could grow, and almost kind of like a retirement plan. So because my plan was to do what I love most, which is storytelling, and using storytelling for transformation. And so I decided with my partners that I had been working for since 2016, 2017, decided to build the company, the Caravanserai Collective, which I'm running now, and which we've had now for almost 2 years, and we've had an amazing run so far. I always tell people that I'm now currently a budding entrepreneur, because that's what it is. It is working for yourself, suddenly facing uncertainties and facing you know going to the grind, and but also having that feeling of time to myself as well. So that's my experience. But I also didn't want to go away from the work that I've done for 30 years, and that pivot was so important. The pivot from what I love was not so big, but the pivot on how I did things, I think, was really important. Decades in policy and advocacy, I realized that a lot of the changes that I was making was very small. It was very short, and I realized that I needed to um, do something that could have more impact. So I focused on storytelling and social cohesion, and how to use storytelling actually for policy. And actually, more of the work that I'm doing now is using storytelling as a tool, and storytelling and public narrative as a tool for policy advocacy, for policy discussions. And now I find myself working very closely with government, working with nonprofit organizations, working for international organizations, wonderful international organizations, one of whom I worked for, who's on this call, and it's been amazing, and I've really realized that the pivot is a self-discovery, and um, I found that there's a lot more, especially when you talk across the generations. Now, a lot of the people that I'm speaking to are from across the generations, because the Gen Xers are actually us. And when I speak to the Gen Zs and millennials, they realize, like, oh, you can do that. You can go out on your own, and they realize that they've been following a template. Many of us have been following a template that is probably handed down by our elders or by our parents. That you go to university, get a job, build a career, whatever the other templates, get married, have kids, and whatever it is, which I completely skipped. But having that template in your career is something that's outdated, and I felt I wanted to break away from it. And now I'm speaking to more younger leaders, in already leaders, some of the millennials that I speak to, and they realize that working the 9 to 5 grind isn't the only thing that they can do, and pivot along the way in your career is important for you to be able to, just in case you are forced to take a pivot, without even having without a choice. We've seen a lot of the layoffs, and that happened at Meta as well. I witnessed the great layoff in Meta, and see people being forced to pivot. And I think the message that I got from that is, just be ready for anything, and for me to really see how we can do that. So I'm completely loving the work that I'm doing now. I'd love to, anyone wants to talk more about storytelling, and how to use that in your organizations, I'd love to do that. I didn't want to take up the time just to promote my Caravanserai Collective
Let me
here. And I could do that. Come to the Kotu event, and I can talk more about that, right, Taman?
So, Ema, thank you very much. That was a great kickoff. I mean, you effortlessly move from corporate life in one of the world's largest corporations to your own Caravanserai Collective. We love you. Yes, as Ema started to say, Ema's mini workshops on storytelling are absolutely fantastic. Come to Kotu on the 23rd of June. The sign-up link's in this presentation. And you can listen to Ema, or you can listen to Grant, who's also with us. And the general theme is communications on that day. So thank you very much, Ema. Let me encourage everyone who has questions to put them in the chat so that when we come to the Q&A after each of the speakers has spoken, we can launch effortlessly into the Q&A. So bless you, Ema. Thank you very much. I'm now going to invite our next speaker, Damien Cummins, to take the stage.
I want to just set context. So my story is a story of failure and trying to hang on. But I'm not going to talk about my story. What I want to do is, hopefully we get a chance to talk about that a little bit later. What I want to do is set the context of why we are where we are. So I'm going to use some data, some research and some data-backed facts to talk about three key things. The first one is at 45, your career doesn't grow. It starts to vanish. I've been an advocate for a while that careers die, and this is not something you hear about from career counselors when you're 18. It's not something you hear about when you're in your 20s. It's not something you know about when you're 30s. It's something you experience. It's a deep, dark secret that we all experience in our 40s, 50s, and 60s. Go to the next slide, please. So most careers die around 45 years old, and there's three key points that back this up. Number one, promotions dry up. Only 10% of promotions are going to employees that are over 45 years of age. So despite equal representation in hiring, older workers are vastly underrepresented in internal promotions. Number two, the interest of hiring older people collapses. Only 35% of people are willing to hire someone over the age of 45, and only 13% of employers are willing to hire someone over the age of 55. I'm not even going to talk about when you're in your 60s because that goes close to zero, particularly in a market like Singapore. And if you've experienced a layoff, and I've experienced several, or you've been let go, unemployment lasts longer. Older workers are 50% more likely to be unemployed for over a year. And of course, once out of a job, the older workers tend to remain unemployed significantly longer compared to our younger peers. Now let's talk about some of the challenges on the next slide. So interesting, when they look at older workers, it's not the experience they see, it's your expiration date. And let me back that one up as well. Next slide, please. So first of all, and I think we've all been victim to this, there's a perceived cost. The reason why older workers, senior vice presidents, VPs, directors get laid off is older workers are seen as too expensive. We have a higher salary, and if you compare a young up-and-comer who's in their 20s, who has maybe 5 to 10 years of knowledge versus someone with 30, it's not worth it from an employer perspective to hire that older worker at 3 times the cost when they can save that money and get almost the same impacts. The big one here is point 2. There's a perception that older workers are not a tech or a culture fit. They're outdated or out of touch. Now, of course, one of my passion areas is artificial intelligence, and I can tell you separately that 40% of office jobs will disappear in 5 years, and 15% of all jobs will disappear in 5 years. We're currently in the second wave of layoffs in Asia. The first layoffs were actually tech companies out of the US. Now we're starting to see banks and major MNCs and local companies laying off. So we're going to see about 20% of banks laying off in AI. And in 2026, you're going to see where it's going to feel bad because it's going to be governments and safety jobs that are going to start to lay off. Now, that's really the first wave. By the time we get 5 years into the future, it's going to be much worse. So if you're a 50-year-old expert that struggles with digital, struggles with AI, that's kind of leaning into this bias that older workers are not a good fit. And finally, there's a short-term ROI mindset. A hiring manager, particularly a young gun in their 30s and 40s, are thinking, why invest in someone who's nearing retirement? Certainly that holds true if you're in your 60s, definitely in your 50s, 50-50 in your 40s. but generally people have a bias towards investing in 20s and 30s-year-old employees rather than those that are older. So what does that lead to? Let's go to the next slide, please. The ladder disappears, and now you need to build your own. And I think most of us in this call kind of feel this true. It's something you feel deep in your bones. So if we go to the last slide, please. So full-time roles have become scarce. Traditional roles are harder to secure. So older workers are 3 times more likely than young ones to remain unemployed. If you feel this out in the market, there are biases towards things like ageism. There are biases towards hiring people that look and talk like you. But in general, roles are becoming scarce. Yes, AI is to blame, but it's also the change in roles, the lack of upskilling, and generally, it's just harder for people to get a full-time job when they're older. Point number 2, we are forced into self-employment. We are a land of people who are over 40, who are coaches, consultants, startup entrepreneurs, academics, adjunct lecturers, anything you can do to kind of bring in bread to put on the table. So self-employment isn't always a choice. And the reality is you're forced into a mid-career or a late career switch into becoming working for yourself. And finally, the last point, it's interesting. There are many government programs which are fantastic to help mid-career or later career people switch, but those career pivots are not promotions. Most midlife promotions are lateral or downwards by nature. So if you do a wonderful course to become an AI expert or learn how to code, good on you. But the reality is, if you're already a director, you're not going to become a director of software engineering. You're going to become an entry-level or mid-level person in that category. And you've got to start from the bottom or near the bottom of the ladder to build your career back up. But of course, when you're over 45, that becomes even more challenging because, as we've talked about, the ladder has disappeared, and it's only your ladder that actually matters anymore. So it's not all doom and gloom. These are the facts of where we are today, and these are the reasons we had the feelings about why we need to do a career pivot. But with that, I wanted to set the context for the rest of the conversation we're going to have over the next hour. Thank you.
Wow, that was very hard hitting, Dr. Cummings, and really to the point. I mean, I was forced to career pivot in the middle, and you know, I don't regret it, but not everyone is equipped to career pivot. You know, particularly if you're used to a corporate life and you've expected it to go on forever. So just a little bit of a shout out for one of the things that we're doing at the Raffles Crew. We reckon that about 20% of our members are kind of between things, whether they want to be between things or not. So we help them build up their confidence by looking at their mental well-being and physical well-being, and then we help them figure out what to do next, and we put them in touch with a huge global network to help them into the next stage. So it's very important that we lean in and help one another when we find ourselves vertently or inadvertently in the situation of needing to find something else. Let me now welcome Dr. Daniela. Welcome, Daniela.
Yeah, we run also, apart from what Simon said, a platform on active aging and longevity, not in Singapore yet. So let me share a little bit about the active ager mindset as I see it for our discussion. Is ageism actually justified? We just heard it. It's a bias. And let's face the reality. There is, I'm not a neuroscientist, but there are studies saying there is, of course, decline of synaptic transmissions, memory decline. But on the good side, we are actually less likely to be provoked or react to negative stimuli. I just wanted to put that in our heads, that of course we need to, some facts about aging we probably have to accept. However, I promote always we need to master the art of living in denial. There is some research on what they call positive age beliefs. The short version is the way you think of yourself, not only how society thinks of you, about yourself, and positive will actually extend your life by 7.5 years, according to Stanford. So if you think you are frail, not capable, this will affect. Positive thinking is basically the message. Very interesting study. One, of course, Hollywood is mastering this art. Here is Jane Fonda, amazing lady, I think over 80, I don't know, 80, 90, you get the point. And the euphemisms are out there. Life gets better with age. Well, we know what she means, right? So I see, and as Ima pointed out, the post-pivot phase as a huge opportunity for all things we never did earlier in life. Keyword self-actualization. You see here a couple of other things. Literature also offers these so-called stages or roles. I don't read them out. Have a look. I think it sounds like the usual suspects of how we tackle our options. What can we do after some sort of midlife career change?
That's a great slide, Daniel. Are we going to be allowed to share that with folks?
Yeah, everything. I know I'm way over your budget in terms of slides. I apologize, but I rush through it. So here is a quick also numbers. How many people of populations are we talking about? In developed countries, it can go even beyond the 25% in a population which is over 50. I'm looking at over 50. Yeah, Germany, Japan, you see it hits even Japan 49. Yeah. You get the point. Here in our region, 10, 15, Thailand, 27. Coaching, and I see our Grant in the audience. I wonder, and we hear so often that 50 overs want to share their experience and say, I want to coach and mentor. Sometimes I'm asking how much demand is out there. Will we have the coach who coaches the coach, who is a consultant who can't find someone who pays for him, right? Just for the discussion. I think as Damien also said, if you have expertise in a specific domain, you can actually pull usually off. I have some friends who do green airports mobility and in their mid-60s. Yeah. Intergenerational exchange is a buzzword we hear also. I believe it's a little bit like dating. It can work. Good matches are not always there. It's actually not easy to put the right people together and in a corporation even to install these methodologies of knowledge transfer. Let's call it that. One beautiful example, again, Hollywood, we all probably know this movie, fantastic way how someone actually in his older career finds and injects value into a startup in New York. Now, let me provoke. Do we know this feeling old people are boring and we don't want to listen to it? We don't want to listen to these old stories rambling about their past and so on. What I'm saying is another point we need to make as active agers an effort to stay relevant and maybe not ramble about the past. Seniorpreneurship, what are opportunities? So here Hollywood gives beautiful movie, what are suspects of actually seniorpreneurship? And the good news is that the seniorpreneurs are much more successful, or at least in their 40s, 45 are the high growth startups. You see it here, 45, the founders. Here, why? And individuals age 55, 64 have the highest rate of entrepreneurship worldwide. So on the positive note, we can do it. Yeah, that's the good news. Why? Because of all our experience. This is all the thing, right? Financial stability, emotional intelligence, industry, network also. And bear with me, opportunity can always, and that's probably the biggest opportunity, if we cannot inject ourselves into the younger society because they may not want us, then let's create our own economy and just be an economy between us, the care industry, and even Singapore government also promotes that strongly. The 50-year-olds can take care of the older ones. Question is, my last thought is, how will this all change, and especially entrepreneurship in the age of AI? Are we actually the avant-garde for something called AI-induced retirement, I call it that, which will hit actually everybody else in society as well. As we just heard from Damien, 50% of the jobs will disappear. So are we just the avant-garde trying out, well, what can be done and what should be done? And of course, the leisure industries, fitness, health, beautification, sport, you name it, are all booming somehow. So I'm also pro good AI. And of course, we see these AI companions. I believe there is huge potential for them even to be a confidant for the deepest fears, all the way the taboos about aging, including the big, heavy hitting questions of death, right? Ugly truth. So at the end of the day, what is important, I think, stays with us as an existential question for all of us. What is the meaning in life? We will still ask ourselves, even if everything else and value creation is taken care of by AI systems. So I believe here, these human-to-human things will become more important. And this is why I value what Simon and the Ruffles crew is actually doing. I think this is spot on and will actually increase in importance. That's it.
Wow, you stormed through those slides, Dr. Daniela. That was absolutely brilliant. And there's so much there to pick on AI, for example. And I might ping Damien on this later. I know that the University of Singapore has invested hugely in an AI lab because I know one of the guys that's one of the principal creators there. He's scary smart. And I wonder if companionship for older people is part of that remit. I've no idea. I'd be fascinated to learn. So please, everybody, we've got to hear from the wonderful Miguel Bernas, whose idea this was. But before we go to Miguel, can I urge you to think about your questions for our wonderful panelists, for Ima, for Damien, and for Daniela, from whom you just heard. Now, Miguel, you're up.
My name is Miguel, and thank you for the introduction, Simon. Funny how things work out in terms of the order. Daniela and Damien did such a good job of, presenting, giving us the data, and presenting sort of the concepts behind where, what's happening to everybody. So I'd like to complement all of that by sharing my own personal story as well, and in a way, kind of bringing a lot of those concepts to life. I am an entrepreneur. For those of you who who are not Star Wars fans, that's the reason why I am dressed in this stupid jacket. I am dressed as a rebel freedom fighter. Also because I wanted to contrast my outfit to Damien, who I was sure was going to dress up in business attire. Even though I'm an entrepreneur today, most of my career has been in corporate, mostly in media and technology companies. My early career was in advertising, then journalism, and then finally marketing. So in a way, I've kind of had 3 career pivots already. I managed to work in media from the time when people still published and read monthly print publications. Remember those, Simon? And I transitioned into television, cable and satellite, and finally digital media. And then, of course, I also worked for big telecommunications and tech companies. I've had the privilege of working at not just some of Singapore's biggest companies, but also some of the world's best known brands. And, in my time, not to toot my own horn too much, I took home a lot of industry awards, traveled the world on a company dime, and was able to do something which I really enjoy doing, which is wearing suits all the time. So some people might wonder why anybody would give this all up. Well, here's the reality, as you guys have heard. Sooner or later, we all have to leave corporate, whether that's your own choice or circumstances make the choice for you. And lately, I've noticed that this seems to be happening to people more and more, and much earlier than people expect. Those of us who have had successful corporate careers, it's just human to think that this gravy train is going to go on forever, and of course it doesn't. So I just want to share some thoughts, some lessons really about what I've learned in my own journey. So first of all, the hardest transition is the idea of being able to leave your old self behind. You know, that guy who got used to wearing suits, being wined and dined by advertising agencies, getting invited to speak at conferences, et cetera, he's going to have a hard time adjusting to this new reality. And as an entrepreneur, one of the things you realize really early on is that people stop returning your calls. Where the conferences you used to get in for free, they now want you to pay, not just to be on stage, but to attend. And actually paying for your own plane ticket, you know, stuff like that. I mean, I almost cried when I lost my PPS status on Singapore Airlines. I mean, that's fucking hard, man. That's
totally relate.
Yeah, and you know, here's the problem. Too many people inadvertently make the company they work for such a large part of their identity, to the point that once you no longer have an instantly recognizable brand name attached to your name, you don't know who you are anymore. And that happens to just a lot of people. Your old self will find that they're ill-equipped for this new reality. And just some of the things as you transition. So one of the first things I realized is to not be afraid to start small, or don't let starting small be discouraging. The myth of the young entrepreneur becoming instantly successful is just BS. That's just not what happens to most entrepreneurs. And maybe your old self was used to picking up the phone and sealing the deal with $1 million deal. Now you're struggling to close a $10,000 deal. As an entrepreneur, you need to be okay with that. In my early days working as a consultant, I worked towards my first anchor client that leads to another and then another. And you just gotta do the work, and you just gotta, do things one step at a time. And very much as was mentioned earlier, it's kind of like the ladder is taken away from you, so you got to make your own ladder, right? And that's just the only way up a ladder, is just one rung at a time. This photo is from one of my early consulting gigs, conducting a marketing workshop for a Danish fertilizer company. Yeah, that sounds like a long way from MTV, from the glamour of rock and roll and television. But that gig led to others, and word of mouth spreads, right? When I became co-founder of a tech startup, we had to pitch to angel investors. Basically, you're pitching all the time, right? When you're in a startup. And we started with investors giving us as little as $50,000, until a few years later we could fundraise over to ticket sizes of $2 million from a single investor. But really, learning to start small is one of and being okay with starting small is one of the toughest hurdles. The second thing is also realizing, and the earlier you do this, the better you're going to feel, is that you're not alone, right? What's happening to everybody, part of my entrepreneurial journey included a brief attempt to get back to corporate. It's human nature, right? When you're surrounded by the unfamiliar, you tend to seek the familiar. And as recently as last year, when I stepped down from my first startup, I thought it was time to go back to corporate. And then I learned the thing that I heard many years ago. Anyway, if your startup doesn't work out, you can always go back to corporate. That turned out to be a lie. The job market, as we've heard, is not forgiving if you've been on your own for a few years, especially when you're 57 years old. But the one thing that I learned quickly is that it wasn't me. I wasn't alone, right? A lot of people in my age group are going through this crossroads right now. Some by choice, some forced by circumstances. But it feels like, if it feels like you're hitting just wall after wall, try to remind yourself it's not you, man. It's just the way things are. And don't take it personally. This photo was taken at our Manila-based startup, and if you stick with it, it takes a while, but eventually you get to assemble a team around you. If you're decent with people, and if you apply a lot of the things that you've learned throughout your corporate career, you will eventually attract people towards what you're doing and make them believe in what you're doing. And finally, I know it sounds cliched, but the final lesson for me is do what you love. one of the things that I told myself is that I'm 57 years old now. If I'm not doing what I love, then when the hell am I going to start doing that, right? After almost 30 years in the media and entertainment business, my new company is building a mobile game that I designed. So I finally get to design my own video game after years and years of playing video games, right? But I'm having to go through all of that shit I talked about earlier. Fundraising, which is the least fun part of startups, at least for me. Pitching to total strangers, getting ghosted, all of that stuff that comes with it. But it's worth it because this project is really my baby. And when you love what you do, when you truly believe in what you're trying to achieve, what you're doing, this shit sells itself. Or at least that's the hope, right? You're much more able to convince somebody to buy in if you genuinely feel that what you're doing is worthwhile and what you're doing is something that you love. All right, so I'm going to leave it there, and I look forward to answering any questions that you guys might have. Thank you.
Thanks, Miguel. So here we are back in the room. 4 absolutely fantastic, insightful presentations on different aspects. And I got thrown out of a corporate job, and I found myself having to be self-employed, whether I wanted to be or not. And the curious thing is, and I mean, I'm 68 now, and I'm on, I think, my 7th startup in Singapore, and several of them have been a catastrophe, I'll be perfectly honest. One of them was sold quite profitably. And currently we have the Raffles crew. Let me say something about the Raffles crew, and then I'm going to invite questions. Can you be thinking, please, about questions that you'd like to put to the panel, our lovely panel? If any of you are feeling insecure in your job, or you're already looking for something new, do come to the Raffles crew. We're not going to try and sell you anything. It doesn't cost anything. What we're going to do is we're going to lean in and we're going to try and help you. Okay, so we got you back. So do your best, but come and see us. It would be great to meet you. Okay, after that commercial, let me throw up in the room and ask, who wants to have a go at one of our panelists with a question? Okay, come. So is anyone currently experienced uncertainty in their job and thinking of moving to a situation where you're working for yourself from a situation where you've been working in corporate? Is anyone that fits? So go ahead.
Hi, Simon and everybody. This is Sujata. Sorry, I just came at the tail end of this, and I was listening to Miguel speaking. And Miguel, thanks a lot. That was a great overview of your recent experience that you shared. I think some of what you spoke resonated deeply with me, this loss of identity. I think for myself, it hasn't been the loss of my identity to me as much as it has been others, like from the outside, people looking at me, right? So I used to be a senior leader in Asia, and suddenly when I don't have that title, people don't know what to do with me. So it was more the other way around than coming from my side. And I'm also struggling, to be honest, about what to do now that I quit my job for 2 years to take care of my mom, and I'm at the space where I'm thinking, should I get back into corporate life or not? And I know how difficult it's going to be. But when I think of becoming an entrepreneur, I think of like, what are the skills I have? Well, yelling at people is not really an entrepreneurial skill. So yeah, I guess to any of the panelists, and I'm sorry I missed the ones who spoke before, would you have any guidance to people? How would you approach this, right? Trying to find what your next gig would be, or even if you wanted to become an entrepreneur, what are some of the things you learned along the way? What are things you'd avoid, etc.? I'm sorry if it's such a broad question, but it's exactly where I'm at the moment. So thank you.
Ema, do you want to have a go at that? You need to unmute yourself. That's it. Yeah.
Yes. Yes. Thank you so much, Zeta, for the question. I think the one thing that you have, well, again, aside from of course, the financial preparation for that is if you're starting out on your own, starting out a business on your own, um, try not to do it alone. I think is my advice, is having either a partner or having or partners to do it with that can help you carry the burden is very useful. It's not always possible. It's not always easy to find, but it gets lonely because you suddenly, after working in such a big corporation, even when I was working, for many years in Indonesia, you had someone do the accounts, you did have someone do the financial, you're suddenly thrust in CEO, CFO, CSO mode all at the same time. And it can be lonely and it can be very isolating as well. But it does have its rewards as well. I think having that control of things, being able to actually determine things on your, chart your own way, chart your own schedule, realizing that things are in your hands, and the failures are yours, but also focus on the success. The success is also yours. And I think that's what I've taken really well on this right now. When people ask me, it's like, are you busy? Yes, I'm busy, but I'm happy to be busy. And I'm really happy to say that. And so I'm in the beginning journey of my entrepreneurial journey. So I think Miguel probably has a lot on me already, years ahead, head start on that. So yeah, find a partner, even if it's not a partner for the business, but yeah, lean on support from others. Join the Raffles crew. I'm sorry, that just
Well, I
that
mean,
became a promo.
Yeah, well, Emo, thanks for the promo. I mean, look, some of the people that we're meeting are pretty shell-shocked.
Mm,
I mean, and I'll be honest with you, particularly, men and women who've got maybe significant liabilities of one kind or another, including families, children, spouses, um, unexpected unemployment, particularly if you're in a foreign country, and some of them is a bit of a shock. So there's a big morale issue at the front, because if you can't get yourself centered, it's very difficult to refocus and to sell yourself into a new role, because your insecurity and your lack of confidence is going to show. So one of the things we try and do is through spiritual and other practice to kind of build people up so that they're positive. And I speak as someone that's really been through that. I was twice made unemployed at short notice in Singapore when I had a family, and that's not a very pleasant experience. So let's just throw this way. So let's go through the panel. What's the toughest part of pivoting? Miguel, what's the toughest part of pivoting?
So I talked earlier about trying to find something that you love doing, right? And there are people who believe that that's just terrible advice. I actually think maybe a smarter thing to do is to try and decide and try to recount what it is you're actually good at. Because finding what you're good at, you're very lucky if what you're good at is also what you love doing. And very often what you're good at, you end up learning to love, right? So that's one of the first things I would say in terms of advice. And the second thing is that as you go out on your own, one of the first things that you will encounter is this thing called imposter syndrome. Because you're moving outside of your comfort zone, you're doing something that gives you a lot of nervousness and essentially makes you uncomfortable. I like to think I'm in the school of thought that says, if I'm feeling uncomfortable, if I'm scared to do something, then I know I'm doing the right thing. Because living in your comfort zone is death, right? That's just stagnating. And so therefore, learning how to embrace the unknown and essentially take risks. As a wise man once said, turn and face the strange, right? So that's really what it is. Turn and face the strange.
Okay.
I think
Daniela, yes, please.
Yeah. One thing is I think one should, before one is laid off, realize that staying in a big job, it might be more risky than actually taking the risks of entrepreneurship. I think there is some sort of trade. So in terms of, I always try to be positive. So I highly recommend, while you have a job, prepare for it. Get the skills while you still have income. Position yourself very, very specifically. Yeah. And as I say, our problem, I think, is actually a much bigger problem. The simple entrepreneurship will be questioned. So how will entrepreneurship change in the times of AI? And what is meaningful actually as well, if things are to a large extent automated? And you heard my point. I think it's human to human. We need to try to find things where we can help each other. And if the money is an issue, I always believe, forget economic capital, think in social capital. We can still help each other and ease the life, even if we don't have enough income. I see here a question. That's my 5 cents on that part.
Damien, sorry, what's the hardest part of this in your view? You went from the top of industry to academe. How easy was that?
Let me tell you a little story. It won't take long. So I was working at a big bank, Standard Chartered. I was on a $600,000 package, doing well. Then I was laid off out of the blue for the second time running. Luckily, at the beginning of 2017, I had a job offer from Prudential, $40K a month, plus a sign-on bonus and a whole bunch of other really good stuff. But I realized I was so burnt out by that point. I hate financial services with a deep passion. And I don't want to work there again. So what happened is I decided to say no to a very expensive offer, and that was difficult because I have no safety net. I've come from a poor family. I own nothing. I have no savings. I managed to buy a house a few years ago from the corporate jobs I had. So letting go of a big single income family, letting go of a steady pay packet was a risk. So I became an entrepreneur in 2017, and I had to learn a whole bunch of new skills. Mainly, I had to fundraise, figure out how to build a product, figure out how to do sales, and I was reasonably successful. We got up to 20 people, raised $1 million USD, and for a couple of years that was great. But the problem is my income went to zero. And then at the end of that process, we tried to raise money, try to get product market fit. And for one shining moment, I managed to do a deal where I was about to raise 11 million USD in a Series A round. And I was on paper worth about $20 million for about a month until it all came crashing down. So what happened during those 4 years is I got money stolen from the business. People scammed us, people with bad actors coming in and doing bad things. Ultimately, this investor was never legitimate. They didn't have that money. And I spent so much time doing that, I was emotionally crushed. And at the end of that process, I lost all of my savings. I was in over $200,000 worth of debt. I'd lost everything except my house, and I'd almost lost every relationship that mattered. What I then had to do was build myself up physically and emotionally again, and I took the first job that came up, and that was this job in academia. And I did that because I have 30 years of experience in digital, and I could actually parlay earning less than 50% salary per month because it's an easy job. It gave me the time to develop my true passion, which is doing another entrepreneurship. But as each year goes by, I realize the clock is ticking, and I still want to make it to a point where I've got a retirement lump sum. But the reality is I'm still paycheck to paycheck. And I think most people have this kind of challenge, which is entrepreneurship is great if you have a lump sum, if you have a safety net. If you're living month to month, that's the hardest challenge. It means that you are in a kind of a desperate state. You have to become a coach and you need immediate sales. You have to have consultants and you need immediate sales. If you're going to become an entrepreneur, somehow you've got to figure out the funding situation, immediately learn new skills, or otherwise get product market fit in day one. So basically, the money is not there, the monthly salary is not there, but the pressure is immense. And I still feel that, though, even though I've got a safety net of a kind of academic job at the moment, I want to become an entrepreneur again, and I will, because I have a product that's in market at the moment. But that's the toughest thing. How do you drop the safety net? How do you go from month to month salary? How do you kind of face the unknown? But also, if you are a provider in your family and you have a risk of losing everything, how do you bounce back from that?
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. I mean, you've laid out the challenges there, Damien. That's absolutely brilliant. I mean, from my own experience, usually a few moments after life is at its bleakest and you're at your lowest, something interesting happens and you grow in a totally unexpected way. I've gone through some pretty significant reversals as well, and I'd love to hear your story, perhaps Damien, over a coffee. But we're getting lots of really wonderful questions here, and I've got some people I want to ask. But Jennifer Alejandro, you've got an interesting question. Can you turn your camera on and put that question to the panel, Jennifer? Are you there?
Yeah, hi Simon, and hello panelists. Thank you for your wonderful sharing. Right. So I just wanted to ask, and I think most of the people in the audience should be interested in this, right? Because it takes a lot of gut strength and resilience to overcome challenges. So when faced with a career loss later in life, whether it's by choice or not, what tips can you give, or what lessons did you learn on whether it's mental preparation, economic, emotional preparation, so that one could pivot, and how you were able to survive to your new chapter today. I think some of it Damien already mentioned, but I'd like to hear the opinions of others.
Jennifer, thank you for the question. It's quite hard to hear you very clearly, but Jennifer's question is written out very clearly in the chat. So perhaps our panelists would like to look at that. Career loss, whether by choice or not, can feel like an identity crisis, she says. Ema, identity, that's your department.
Yes, it is. Yeah, no, definitely. And I guess it's how, and it might sound a bit blip when you say it's like, well, from the start, I think people make their job their identity. And I think it's hard not to, especially when you work for a large company. And I went through this as well, on both sides. For many years in Indonesia, it's which Ema the Habibi Center, and even then after that it's Ema Facebook. So it was always the job was your identity. The letting go of that identity is hard, but also, I mean, but this is me, right? I always try to find the spin in it. It's also very liberating. After that, it's finding ways to find your new identity, and again, I'm not a psychologist, so I'm not going to attack it like that. It's very liberating when you're looking for a new identity, for me, and it might not be for everyone, but it's finding, for me, it was finding new purpose, finding something different, and as I said, at the start, it's self-discovery. What, as Miguel said, what are you good at, as opposed to what are you passionate about, and how you can actually find ways to actually get to that. And so for me, it's the new way of life. It takes a lot of getting to used to. Yes, I also cried, Miguel, when I lost my PPS status as well. I think that's really resonated. And paying for my own flights and conferences and all of that. Yes. But then you find new joys of not having to stick to a corporate schedule. Not having to, I mean, although my partners are in the US and the UK, so I still have to stay up for late night meetings, but finding that new identity of being an entrepreneur, calling the shots, and the practical challenges kind of are more difficult, I feel like, than the mentally for me, but you get through it. It is an identity crisis, but what is your identity to start with? You can rebuild your life. And to Daniela's point early on, I loved her slides. And one of the things that she said, like, people starting out, one of the things that made me brave about starting out new and actually make that change, make that first pivot, is reading about people who started out so late in life. Colonel Sanders started out KFC, I heard, was in his 50s. The owner of Walmart started in when he was 56. And I learned like at 48, the late Anthony Bourdain was a sous chef. He was 48. And that's actually what made me leap into going into a different job. So it's not always a crutch. It's not always a challenge.
That's wonderful, Ema. And we've got a number of wonderful questions coming up, and I want to get to them. Ema, if I can find it. Somebody called Taya says, Ema, you're looking great. I joined because I saw you. So we got some of Ema's fan club on here, which is great. We've got a question from the wonderful Roger Croker. Roger, we miss the fact that you're no longer in Singapore, but how are you down there in Australia? Can you shout loudly so we can hear you? What was your question?
Good. All good, Simon. Bloody cold here, though. Freezing cold.
Yeah. Go ahead.
All good, though. So, yeah, my question, this has been a really, really great session. I'm really interested in the themes. I'll come to the question in a minute. I'll give you a quick context. I having come from large company background, I joined a small corporate finance business when I was 46 in Australia. And then we expanded that business to operate in Asia and New Zealand. And some of the comments that you've made about identity, et cetera, just really resonate with me because at the time, my wife had large tech corporate roles. So we sort of had that natural balance and we were trying to find a balance, which is why I went into the smaller company. But talking about identity really resonates with me because, so many of my friends were like CEOs, CFOs in really high-powered sort of large companies in their 40s. And I often felt kind of, geez, am I doing the right thing here? What am I doing? Why the hell am I doing this? And I had to go through that kind of valley of death kind of sort of scenario. And now, nearly 20 years later, I mean, I'm 63, right? I'm still in the same company. We've pivoted, we've grown. It's been really challenging, but we have such a great group of people. It's a small group. And I'm so thankful that I've done that. And some of the comments you guys have made have really resonated with me, like really. And I just think, wow. So my question is, I've got a 25-year-old son and a 22-year-old daughter. The son's sort of out in the corporate world now, ticking all the boxes, getting really well supported, high growth, everyone's fussing about them. How the hell do you advise these kids to sort of plan their careers so that they can get through this stuff, when they're in their 40s, because it's going to happen.
Yeah, I mean, I was as a father of two. I mean, I think it's amazing that you think your children will listen to anything you say, particularly when they're in their 20s. But given that, so Daniela, you want to?
Yes. So I'm actually Roger. Thanks for the passion. Yeah, I'm actually really interested how the retirement systems, which worldwide, I would argue, let people down, right? In our generation, roughly, but I believe there will be a huge change. And of course, the social contract, which is sort of the underlying idea, will probably have to be amended, correct? So not only because of the declining birth rates, the numbers don't really support the old model. So in other words, there will be or should be innovation. And I think if people are young, they can. So first answer is financial planning today. Yes, there are plans. Financial institutions offer things. We work actually in that field as well. So we are monitoring this. The answer is there is a bit of movement and we will see new products. So it's hopefully coming for the young people. However, I believe if there's a huge pain point in society, then there is also an opportunity for jobs and so on. So if I were young, at least I would have an eye on fields which maybe we wouldn't want normally to engage with. And I mean the crypto world. So I'm not talking about crookish, these IPOs or what was it called? I'm talking about For example, there are visions to reorganize not only democracy, but also social contracts, social structures. Right now, many of those are thought experiments, but some of them touch on important issues like insurance, okay, and retirement. So the short version is, and I think this even could be inspiration for many of us, we need, I think, also as mid-ager, be part of innovation. I'm always looking, where is something moving and how can I plug myself into this? And as I say, we need, even in corporate, when we are in corporate, we need to think ahead. And as Ima says, let's not go into the trap and think my job is my identity. No, you're much, much more. Find it out early, build up your own presence, identity, be independent, create the resilience you will need later. And the other thing also, we should help each others. Why everybody's doing his own company? Why don't we team up and build together companies, right? Rather than everybody becomes a coach. Everybody tries to do the same thing. The world is connected. Why don't we connect and help each other? As I said, with money, without money,
Yes.
we need to be innovative.
That's
Sorry.
brilliant. That's brilliant, Daniela. That's brilliant. And in my experience, having fallen off my perch several times, often because of my own very large mouth, I find that you meet people who help you, and they're nearly always people you don't know. People appear. The universe sends you what you need to be successful. So courage, don't be afraid, I think is a really important feature of this. I want to bring in a few other people.
Can I just add something? Because
yeah.
I'm thinking of a response there for Roger. So I recently became a dad. My daughter is 8 months old, so I've got a long way, she's not in her 20s. I've got a long way to kind of plan for what happens to her eventually. But what I'd say is this, like, if you're advising somebody in their 20s, one of the best things you can do is basically warn them about what's coming. Because when you're in your 20s, you feel invulnerable, right? You feel like you can do no wrong, and you feel like the world is your oyster and all of that stuff. One of the worst lies being propagated is this whole idea of buy experiences, not things. And it's all the fucking credit card companies who want you to believe that, because they just want you to spend money and spend money on things that you actually can't afford, right? Which is completely the wrong mindset for somebody that's in their 20s and just starting to earn money. So you gotta, what I would say is warn them about what's coming. Have them realize that there is going to be uncertainty in your future. And this whole thing of, what Damien was saying earlier is that the importance of being able to build a nest egg, or, some kind of war chest for you when the inevitable happens and you have to you realize you have to become an entrepreneur. Very, very hard to do that without this kind of war chest. Very, very hard to do that without a willing partner. Which is the other thing, and that's the second piece of advice for young people. I'm not a huge fan of Professor Scott Galloway, but if you guys know who that is, one of the more interesting things that he says in his book is that the most important decision you're ever going to make as a young person is not your first job or not what degree you're going to take up in college. It's finding your life partner. And that is the biggest, most important decision you're going to have to make. All of that, it's amazing how things realign in your future when you realize that you've picked the right person.
Okay, well, you're moving into a slightly different area, Miguel. Although we do have a Raffles crew member who is developing an AI application to enable you to find the right partner. Whether that includes AI partners, I'm not sure. I'll ask him. But thanks for that advice. I want to come to a very active member of Raffles crew, Grant Upbeat Bosnick. Grant, you have had the most amazing set of career changes. You went from being a rock drummer to being a coach. And in fact, those of you who come to Seekers Founders Funders at Koto on the 23rd are going to have an opportunity to go into a workshop with Grant and hear about emotional intelligence. Grant, would you like to comment on making that pivot?
Yeah, sure. We can comment on that. For me, I was a pro drummer at one point in my life, and then decided to do something different after that. Got into coaching and consulting, and I hid the fact that I was a drummer for about 20 years in my professional life because I didn't think it looked professional. So then during COVID, about 5 years ago, 2020, I read an article about Arvind Krishna, the CEO of IBM. And when everybody was working from home, he took everybody on a town hall tour of his house to show that he was human. And I thought that was a pretty cool thing to do. So I decided to put some bongos back behind my camera here and just to show a bit about myself personally. And it helped to redefine my identity. I got the nickname Grant Upbeat Bonsnick up there. There's a registered trademark for Upbeat, which is one of the services I offer. Published this book above this side here. So now I combine drumming on stage with large audiences to help companies in their teams and their leadership and culture within companies. That's what I do. That was a pivot and just kind of combined it all together. And that's how I reinvented myself, and that's the branding that I've got and promoting now.
And you came to the tropics from a very cold Canada. We're delighted to have you, young Grant. So come on the 23rd and meet Grant. He's absolutely great. Grant just reminds me that we're not a glum lot at the Raffles Crew. For example, we have a drama group. We had our first drama session about a month ago, hosted by the wonderful Leanne Shaw. Oh, and Ema, of course, was one of the stars of that drama. How could we stop you? Were you Agamemnon? What were you, Ema?
I was Zeus. Zeus, of course, Ema was king of the gods, as you would expect. And we read a satirical play about the Trojan War, and 20 people, and we drank a bit of wine, and we all made idiots of ourselves. It's important to have fun, wherever you are in life. So, we do that as well. So, we've got Tyre. Tyre, are you with us? You sound like you're incredibly busy. Tyre, can you give us your question?
Hi, Simon. Hi, yes. I was just, first of all, thanks for all the tips that people have been typing into the chat. By the way, I turned my video off because anytime I Zoom, my 2-year-old granddaughter feels she is also invited. And so
what about your 91-year-old father? Is he there as well?
He's actually down by the pool,
okay,
enjoying a little bit of exercise. So yeah.
You sound like you're pretty busy.
I am, which is a blessing. And I've discovered that settling into those difficult situations is actually what helps make you stronger. At the same time, I kind of feel at the end of the day, is there anything left for me? So that's one thing. So what I can share, I think, is that maybe realizing that this is meant to be, and then figuring out how to deal with it graciously is one thing. And then, becoming a call girl. I didn't want to set up my own company. I felt I've been there, I've done that. It's exhausting. I don't want to have to worry about paying, at the end of the month, people's paychecks because they rely on it. And so I became a call girl. I, sold my services to other people, organizations, companies, institutions, academic institutions. So they sell me. And so whenever they need someone senior with experience, then they call me, and then I just show up to either coach or facilitate a workshop. Yeah. So the gig economy, I think, is something that others might want to consider as well, though I wish it would be higher in terms of income generation. But it is a way that you can sort of save your energy to do the things that you really like doing versus the marketing and the invoicing and all of that.
Yeah. You're in Indonesia, are you, Ty?
I'm in Jakarta, yeah.
Okay, I was going to say you could bring your 2-year-old and your 91-year-old dad to SFF. It would be very invigorating for him. Thank you very much for your input.
Thanks so much. I love this session, by the way. Thanks for everyone.
Super. Now, we also had a question from, where are we?
I did have a question as well too, Simon, if that's okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
It's Grant here. Yeah, I had it in the chat function. I thought you were going to pull me the last time you were talking to me, so I did type the question in chat there as well too. And I'm curious the panelists' point of view on this too. So I'll read the question where it said, "What would be the number one selling point for you or others 50 plus to make a large multinational offer you something?" And what